If you go to my Instagram account, you'll see a photograph that I took this morning under the cover of darkness coming into Center City, Philadelphia. I actually pulled over to the side of the road. I don't want you to think that I took it while I was still driving. I didn't. I stopped and I was over the Schuylkill at the Art Museum. What did I want to capture? And go look at it on Insta and also on my Facebook page. The skyline of Philadelphia. Because all of the skyscrapers, and as I came in passing Boathouse Row on my left shoulder, all of the boathouses, green. All of the skyscrapers, green. The whole town's been painted green. Although there was one boathouse that I saw with colored Christmas lights still on it. I don't know which school that is. Why? Because everybody is psyched for the big game. Get it? The big game. So tomorrow, I intend to have my phone open to bet parks in one hand and a hoagie in the other. I was looking at the prop bets. Now, I haven't laid anything down on the prop bets yet. I'm in so far on a parlay. You know what that is? It's like a triple play, increase your odds, 3 different things at once. And also, I cannot believe that the Birds are only a 1.5 point pick. I think they're going to cover just like they did with the Niners, just like they did with San Francisco. You know what I'm saying. But the prop bets. Okay. Hurts and Mahomes to combine for 600 plus yards passing. That's fun. Game to be decided by exactly 3 or 7 points. When I was young, we used to go to the Eagles, my father, my brother, and me. And I'm sorry, this is a long-winded story, but it's exciting that the Birds are in the big game. So we would drive from our house in Doylestown to Sodderton, about a 25-minute ride. And then we would board a bus in Sodderton with the same, mostly guys, couple of wives, couple of, girlfriends, but mostly guys, 50 people, same people, all season long, year after year. And the bus would then go down to Veterans Stadium. We'd watch the game. All of our seats were together. There's a really nice guy from Sodderton named Charlie Seitz. And Charlie ran the bus. And then, after the game, usually in that era, up until Vermeil, the Eagles would have lost and we would all go home. But they would pass around on the bus a grid. It would be like this. I'll just use the yellow lines. So at the start of the bus trip, it would look like this. And you would put your initials in a box. You'd pay, I don't even know what you'd pay, like $2, $5, not a lot. You'd write your initials in the grid. And then there would be a drawing. And they would draw the numbers, so you might get like an 8. That was not a really good number. You might get a 3. You might get a 6, a 5, a 2, a 1. And then you would see what were your digits. So like here, and let's say this is like the Birds and this is the Chiefs. If this were me and I had a 3 and a 4, that's not bad. And then I would be hoping that the end score was going to be something that ended with a 3 with the Birds and something that ended with a 4 with the with Kansas City. I'm trying to play by the rules here. Anyway, it was great fun. And it's so funny when I look at the prop bets and I see, game to be decided by exactly 3 or 7 points. It takes me back to my youth, which is one of the reasons why I'm so, caught up in all of this. It makes the game a lot of fun. Anyway, Bet Parks. The only sportsbook and casino app I recommend. You get the idea. It's great fun. Terms and conditions apply. Got to be 21 and in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. But have a little skin in the game for tomorrow's action. Speaking of which, purely coincidentally, this is an enormous gambling weekend. I think it's $16 billion to be wagered on now I can say Super Bowl. So I thought it was perfect timing. Did you hear John Aristotle Phillips on yesterday's radio program. He was great. You know, the A-bomb kid from Princeton in 1976, he submitted a paper in his physics class, 34 pages long, and he explained how to build an atomic bomb. And of course, you know, it was immediately classified and he became a cause celeb, and he's a really bright guy. Well, what does someone who submits a physics paper at Princeton on how to build an atomic bomb end up doing in life? He's an entrepreneur. And among his endeavors is Predictit. Predictit is a wagering site on elections. In yesterday's poll question at Smerconish.com asked if gambling on elections ought to be legal. Most said no. I disagree. I mean, how do you justify wagering on the big game, but not on election outcomes? So he's going to be a guest of mine on CNN today. I just printed from Predictit what are their most recent markets. And there's something really interesting going on, which is this. So if you look at the polls on the Republican side of the aisle, Trump versus DeSantis with others in the field, you've got, and I saw 4 different polls, and I've promoted them all on radio, so you can fact check me on this, but take my word. They're like 4 different polls that show that Trump's in the upper 40s, tapping out at about 50%. DeSantis is 25 to 30. And you could look at that as glass half full or glass half empty. Like, wow, he really trails Trump. Or he hasn't announced. He's never run national, and he's already at 25 or 30. But anyway, it's Trump with a commanding lead if there are more people, think Nikki Haley, in the race. But at Predictit, the GOP presidential nominee is a dead heat, 37 cents between Trump and DeSantis. So does the betting market know something that the polling market does not know? Even more interesting to me when you say, okay, who will win the U.S. presidential election? As of right now, because I just printed this at Predictit, Biden is a 34-cent pick. That means if you bet 34 cents, you collect $1. DeSantis, 29. Trump, 26. Gavin Newsom, 7. So, you know, some of these markets, some of this is inconsistent. But it's really interesting because it's totally determined by wagering. And if you heard John Aristotle Phillips on radio yesterday, you know, he makes the case that the betting markets know best. I mean, a question that needs to be asked of him is, wait, hold on, the pollsters are modeling. You know, they're making sure, do we have a sufficient number of R's and D's and people of color and women and men and et cetera, geographic balance, et cetera, et cetera. There's no control over who wagers here. So how can that be? And yet the track record of those wagering markets is pretty damn good. Which party wins the presidency in 2024? 5150 Ds. So put it all together, and what does it mean? It means the likelihood, according to the betting market, Biden is the nominee, DeSantis and Trump neck and neck, but DeSantis perhaps with an edge, Biden with the advantage in terms of who's elected president. So, yeah, fun stuff. You know, fun stuff. And I'm looking forward to having John Aristotle Phillips on the program today. I mentioned yesterday's poll question. Today's poll question, inspired by Admiral James Stavridis on this week's radio program. Here's what I'm asking. Should U.S. military aid to Ukraine continue to grow incrementally, swiftly, or not at all? Incrementally, swiftly, not at all. A question that I'm going to address on CNN today is whether we are, these are not my original words, this is the title of a piece that was published at The Hill that caught my eye. Are we sleepwalking into World War III? In the thumbnail for this YouTube conversation, I had a photo of the president with some weaponry behind him. I didn't mean just him. And I hope that people don't look at the thumbnail. This just occurred to me and think like, oh, it's a slight against Biden because he's asleep. No, I mean it in a more expansive means than Biden, although it's all unfolded on his watch. And think about the incremental nature of our involvement in Ukraine over the Russian invasion. David Handelman, who works with me at CNN, did a nice job in reconstructing how this all unfolded. Last February 25, the day after the invasion, Biden authorized $350 million in security assistance for Ukraine, okay? A drop in the bucket. But at the time, it sounded like a lot of money. The U.S. then approved another $200 million in arms transfers, then $800 million. I'm trying to stick just with the figures. Billions ultimately flowed. And since the invasion, the United States has invested nearly $30 billion in Ukraine. And I've mentioned the money, but the armaments have progressively gotten higher. As a matter of fact, a story in The Hill, how far is President Biden willing to ascend the escalation ladder, makes this observation. If past is precedent, no rarely means never when it comes to American support. This applies to statements or lack thereof from the president and key deputies alike. To the contrary, it usually means not yet. As if to confirm the corollary, the Ukrainian defense minister has remarked all types of assistance at the beginning went through the no stage. This means no as of today. Well, that's what causes me to ask the question about this incremental aid. And as I've raised the subject before, why has it been an incremental approach? I think it's because two things. One, the concern over Putin going nuclear diminishes. I don't know whether it should diminish. I just sense that that's the case. And also, I think there are shifting priorities here. That initially it was one of, like Biden giving the $350 million initially, like give the Ukrainians something to resist the Russian invasion. And now it becomes one of, because of the impressive fighting capability of the Ukrainians, it becomes one of, hey, they could actually win this thing, although we should define what winning means. But it's not just resist. They can be on the offensive. So that's what I'm getting to in the poll question today. And when I had this conversation with Admiral Stavridis this week, he was of the mindset that we ought to throw in the kitchen sink now. Stop the incremental, just go full bore in. Now, of course, there's now Republican control of the House of Representatives. There's a lot of pushback coming from the right in terms of the extent of our aid in Ukraine. I had a caller that stands out in my mind on radio ask me this week, what exactly is the American priority? Why are we doing this? And that's, a recurring question that you'll hear. You heard it in Iraq. You heard it in Afghanistan. Should we be a global player? And I'm kind of torn on this because I want us to be supportive of Ukraine. I am a believer of a domino theory in that part of the world. But I also don't want us opening bases everywhere we hear of the presence of Al Qaeda. I think that's gotten us in trouble on a terror front when we think there's a presence of terrorists. Our response is to hurry up and put military personnel in that location, and then all we do is inflame the locals. But this is different. This is a Russian invasion of Ukraine, bringing them right to the doorstep of NATO. And of course, if my friend Roger Waters were here, he would say, well, we, the West, have stoked them into doing so, and we're the ones who have been initially provocative. One other thing I wanted to note. One of my guests today is retired Colonel Jonathan Sweet, who co-authored a piece also for The Hill, noting that in the State of the Union address, it was not until nearly the end of the 1 hour and 13-minute address, largely on domestic issues, that the president addressed the threat of Vladimir Putin. Biden framed Putin's special military operation in Ukraine as a test for the ages. And then writes, if it's a test for the ages, why was it buried in the State of the Union? Moreover, how do we pass that test as a country? And as the titular head of the free world, what national sacrifices will be required of us to prevail? So, we've really upped the ante in Ukraine. And it does raise the question of whether we're kind of sleepwalking, meaning without acknowledgement and this will be the case even more if we take Admiral Stavridis' advice and throw in the kitchen sink. Like, are we in some dystopian form of World War III right now? And at a time, and as I speak to you live, I don't know what was the point of origin and who controls that craft unmanned that was shot down over Alaska, I guess 10 miles out to sea. But on top of the issue with Russia and Ukraine, you've also got China and the balloon and whatever this might be. Not sure that it even comes from China. Kim Jong-un, every time there's other hotspots in the globe, he's like, "Hey, don't forget me," and he sends off a missile launch. The Chinese are encircling Taiwan. There's a lot of dangerous stuff going on around the globe, and we're all fixated on the Super Bowl tomorrow. So it's an interesting time. It's a really interesting time. All right. Well, thank you for your interest. I'm going to go and read all your comments as I normally do. Let me see if I can just pick something out right now. Thank you for that. EJ says Ted Olson was an amazing guest this week. He reminds us why 9/11 should not be put too far out of our minds. I so agree with you. His wife, Barbara Olson, was aboard the plane that crashed into the Pentagon, and he spoke to her as those events were unfolding. And the subject yesterday of the conversation was that we had at one time more than 700 people at Gitmo. We're down to 34. Nobody's been tried. Nobody's been tried. There haven't been any trials. He was saying, let's bring it to a head. And if we can cut a deal and give these folks a commitment of life in prison without the possibility of parole and wrap it up, then we ought to do that. And as I said, and some caller said, well, they're really not at risk of a death penalty because we have it in this country and we don't mean it. In retrospect, and I said it then in response to people who thought it was a security threat, but we should have tried all those folks in the Southern District of New York. It could have been a shining moment for the United States to take those terrorists and put them on a public trial within the shadow of where once the Twin Towers stood. What else? Bob Starner, Eagles 31, Chiefs 27. Yeah, 1.5 points to me. Maybe I'm overconfident. I think the Birds ought to be a much bigger pick than that. You're saying 4 points. Okay. All right. What else? Aren't they already in custody for life, says Sean Nichols. Well, kinda. And I think the way it really ends is we're just waiting for, attrition. They'll never get tried and they'll eventually die. 27-10 Birds feels better, Joseph Abrams. Yeah. Bruce Clark, nah, you're at 2 points. I don't think so. Hope you'll be talking Kelly McCluskey. I'm sorry to disappoint you. Hope you'll be talking about the Murdoch case on CNN today. Fascinating. I'm not. Just because there's no room at the inn, but Valerie Borline has been my guest recently from the Wall Street Journal. So Danny Savalos was on with me yesterday, and truly the way Danny's booking came about is that he and I were going back and forth as two lawyers interested in the Murdoch case, particularly on the issue of whether all of this evidence of his financial crimes ought to be coming into the murder trial. And then I reached a point where I'm like, Danny, let's have this conversation on air. This is too good. He and I both think that this is legitimate grounds. I shouldn't speak for Danny, I think we both think there's a legitimate issue for appeal here. In the same way that I made the point about Cosby, and a lot of people didn't want to hear it, that evidence came into that trial that arguably should not have, and ultimately the state Supreme Court agreed with me. In this case, okay, prosecution, you've convinced me. Alec Murdoch is a crumb. This guy is, whatever descriptor you want to use. I don't know why I'm so impacted by this, but when I see the housekeeper's son, who has a brother, and both of them have some issues, and he stole from them, their mother, listen to this, their mother cleaned his house. fell down the stairs and died. I'd like to know more about that. But okay, I'll accept that at face value. Ellick steps in and offers to represent them. He'll handle it. He'll take care of them. He gets, like a $5 million settlement and doesn't give it to them. To take advantage of those two grieving boys who are not capable of defending themselves. Oh, okay. So now look at me now. Now I'm like, that guy is a dirtbag. How can I sit here and not allow that view to prejudice me on the question of whether he murdered his wife and son? I'm totally prejudiced. But that's why, I said in a tweet that I think that the prejudicial harm has outweighed the probative value. What's the probative value? That it goes to his motive? I don't understand how that goes to his motive. Okay, I'm going to be bankrupt. All the financial walls are closing in on me. I know what I'll do. I'll kill my wife and my son, and that'll divert everybody's attention. How? The world in your community is going to grieve, the loss of your wife and son, and then we're going to go back to, hey, Ellick, you stole $10 million. Makes no sense to me, but they got it into evidence. And I wonder if the defense in this case is playing with house money because the case will have to be tried again. Okay, I'm sorry to get, you can tell. You find it fascinating. I find it fascinating too. Go Birds. Thank you for watching. Go vote on today's poll question. Give TC some play on TC After Dark, will you please? And thank you so much for listening. We had a good week of radio this week, like 5 great shows. A lot of days, we'll say to one another, I'll say to TC, I don't know, man, that show today, bored me a little bit. We had some really good material this week, and I just am grateful to all of you for being listeners and viewers. I'll see you on CNN soon. And by the way, if there's no breaking news, the CNN show now replays at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, Philly time. See ya.